The topic for today's video is 10 top interview tips. I've also written a blog article on this topic, so you can go ahead and check out our website, CN Writing and Speaking Company, by following the link below. So this is something that we get a lot of questions about, which is, what should I do to prepare for my interview, above and beyond the traditional steps? So if you go online and you search the phrase top 10 interview tips, you will find literally thousands of websites with hundreds of tips about what to do for an interview. Now, if it's the week before that big interview that you're having, seeing all of these tips can be very overwhelming. So I've gone ahead and done some research and found the top 10 tips that are listed online. So hopefully this will be a little bit less stressful for you and help you to prepare for the interview. So the first tip that I've found is to dress the part. Now, this can seem very obvious, perhaps, but actually it's surprisingly important to look like an employee of the company where you're interviewing. So you need to take the time before you go to the interview to research what employees at this company wear. Now, it can vary widely. For example, I once worked at a t-shirt company, and it was totally acceptable to go into work wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt. It was totally fine. Everyone did it, even the boss. I've worked for other companies where you wanted to wear a pencil skirt and a suit jacket. So it is so variable on the company that you're going to. So it's important that you do the research before and you show up looking and sounding like an employee of this company. So the second tip that I found is to research the company. Now, this is pretty obvious again, but I want to take it kind of one step further. So typically, people know that you need to research what the company does. How much do they produce? What are their earnings? These kinds of things. But one thing that I think a lot of people overlook is to sort of research why the company does this. So it's important that you know not only what the company is producing, but what is this company's mission? What are its values? By going above and beyond the what and into the why, you can really distinguish yourself as an interviewee. So, for example, at one company that I applied for, I went to their website before the interview and I found the top 3 core values of the company. And I memorized these core values. And then during my interview, they asked me that question that probably everyone has gotten, which is, why do you want to work for this company? And what I said for my answer was I listed those 3 core values that I had found, and then I stated how my values as an individual aligned with their core values. And I said to them, my interviewers, that because my own personal value system aligns with their corporate mission, I know that I would be a good fit here and that I would enjoy working for this company. And I was successful in that interview and I did actually get the position. So by going above and beyond and sort of researching the values of the company, you really set yourself apart as an interviewee. So I think that's something actually very useful to look into doing. Okay, so the third tip that I found was to research your potential boss. Now, just like researching the company, this is really important. If you Google your boss's name, you can typically find a LinkedIn profile at the very least. Sometimes, if your boss is well known enough, you can actually find a PDF of a resume or a CV online, and then you can do even more research on the boss. Now, you want to kind of avoid being super creepy with this, so during the interview, you shouldn't be like, oh, I noticed that you checked in on Facebook to this cafe. I really like this cafe. Like, that's weird. But if you say to your boss during the interview, oh, I saw that you went to this university and you studied this topic, you can then ask them questions like, how do you think that your education prepared you for this work? And how do you think that your prior experiences led you to get this job? And this kind of a thing. So these are questions that if you ask to your potential boss, you've shown that you've gone really far into your research and that you want to really understand this company. And even more so than impressing your potential boss, it actually, doing this kind of a research, it helps you realize, like, do I see myself in this kind of position? Like, do my career goals sort of align with my boss's trajectory? Like, is this something I really want to do? And knowing these kinds of questions and the answers before you go into the interview is really important. It's important to impress the interviewers, but it's also important to know, kind of figure out, is this job right for me? Are these people right for me? And those are questions that are totally valid and you need to think about before you go to the interview. Okay, so the first step, fourth tip is probably my favorite, and it seems super obvious, but I think a lot of us forget. This tip is don't be late. Be on time for your interview. I think a lot of us get so wrapped up in preparing for the interview, in knowing what am I going to say, who am I going to be interviewing with, that we forget this super basic step, which is, okay, physically, how am I getting to this interview, and where is this interview? So something that I like to do when I'm going to an interview is I figure out what route I'm going to take. Maybe I'm going to go by public transportation, or maybe I'm going to take my car. Either way, I figure out my route, and a few days before the interview, at the same time that I would leave for the interview, I go and I take that route and I go to the actual location of the interview as if I were really going. This has helped me a lot. I'm very directionally challenged and I have some issues with navigation. So by going to the interview location a few days before the interview, you just give yourself that extra confidence. And on the day of the interview, you're not going to be sort of scrambling around trying to find the interview at the last minute and getting there like all sweaty and confused. So it seems like something that's not quite as crucial, like, oh, I can just look it up in the morning of. But I highly recommend that you go to the interview location a few days before the interview. It's actually really helpful. Okay, so the fifth tip is to practice good listening skills. Good listening skills. Now, this is something that's really difficult for me. Obviously, I really enjoy speaking. So when I go to an interview, I'm very tempted to just go into this huge monologue about why I'm the most perfect candidate for this job, how I was born for this position, like I get really into it, like really theatrical and really like, but that's actually pretty bad, because when you go to an interview and you're talking and maybe even, like, God forbid that you at some point interrupt the interviewer, it makes you look like you're not a good team player. And if you're not a good team player, then they're not going to hire you, because they want to hire someone who works well as part of a team. So just make sure the day of your interview, take a deep breath, relax, allow your interviewer to completely finish the question before you begin your answer. Don't interrupt. And when you do get the opportunity to speak, also ask your interviewer a question. Make this a conversation, back and forth. It shouldn't be that the interviewer is talking the whole time, and it shouldn't be that you are talking the whole time. So you need to keep this kind of going back and forth. Okay, number 6. Again, this one seems obvious, but a lot of people don't take the time to do this. Now, this tip is to prepare answers to the common interview questions. Now, again, just like going online and looking for interview tips, you can easily find lists of like the top 20, top 50 interview questions that are going to be asked at the interview. Now, it's so important to do this because actually a lot of employers are going to do the same thing, and then they're going to ask you these common questions. So having your answers prepared, it just makes everything so much easier. That being said, you don't want to prepare general answers to these. You want to prepare an answer specific for every interview that you're going to. So, for example, let's say the question is, why are you a good fit with this company? That's something that you're definitely going to get asked. Like, why would you be a good fit? Why would you be a good employee? So let's say you're going to interview as a barista at a coffee shop. Then maybe you want to say something like, well, I have really great customer service skills, I'm really focused, and I have a really strong work ethic. So these would be 3 things that you might say. However, let's say you're applying for an adjunct professor position. Obviously, you wouldn't say the same things. You might say something like my research skills, my teaching skills, and my writing skills. So it's really important that you have the answers to these common questions prepared for each interview, and specifically tailored to each position you're applying for. It makes it, when you get to the interview, you just feel so much more confident. You're like, I already know maybe what they're going to ask me, and I know what I might say. And one thing that's actually super helpful that I've done in a lot of my interviews is the day before the interview to have either a friend or a family member just go through a list of like the top 50 interview questions with you, and then you give them the answers and you sort of get a practice like what they might ask and what you're going to say. And then they can give you some feedback like, wow, that answer sounded really stupid, or gosh, that answer was really spectacular, and you can kind of gauge where you are. So I find that super useful. Hopefully you have someone friendly around who will help you in that way. Okay, number 7. This one I found, and it's super funny, but also super true, which is that you should double check your social media accounts. Now this is something that I think a lot of us, you wouldn't even think about checking your Facebook before you go to a job interview. But actually, a lot of your employers, maybe all of the employers nowadays, they're going to go and check. They're going to look at your Facebook. They're going to look at your Twitter. And they're going to see like, what kind of things are you saying? What kind of things are you posting? And if there's something that is particularly abrasive or politically incorrect that's easily readable by the public, you could actually hurt your chances of getting hired for a position. So if you have the way that I kind of think about it is like, if I have something on my Facebook that I would be embarrassed if my mom saw, then you probably shouldn't have this on your Facebook in general. Because if your mom shouldn't see it, then your employer shouldn't see it. So I just kind of like, that's kind of like my rule of thumb. Just go through your Facebook and your social media accounts regularly and just take out anything that might hurt you in a job search. Number 8. This is something that I think a lot of people overlook, but it's actually very important. So this tip is to bring printed copies of your resumes and your references list to your interview. Now, I think most people assume, often correctly, that when you go to your interview, your interviewer is already going to have a copy of your references list and your resume. Now, this might be the case, but there's always a chance that it's not. So to be on the safe side, I always print out copies of my references list and my resume. And I would say, you could print maybe 10 or 12 copies depending on how many people you're interviewing with. And what I also do is I print this on really nice paper, like thick, nice paper. And then if your resume is in color, then print it in color, make it look really nice. And then put all of your documents into a professional looking portfolio and bring this with you. Not just a normal folder, but go ahead and get like a nice, maybe like a leather folder, or, just a portfolio that looks really professional and put together. So when you go to an interview and you can just sort of hand your potential boss this really nice, colored, thick resume, it just gives like this impression that you've really taken the time to go above and beyond, and you're just like really invested in this interview. So if you're giving this impression to your boss, then that's the kind of employee that they want to hire, is someone who's really committed, who goes above and beyond, and who's really invested in their work. So by printing out your resume and your references list, you just give this extra edge kind of above the competition, which is really important. Okay, number 9, we're almost there. This is another really important one that I think people forget about, and that's body language. So if you go to your interview and you're kind of just like slouching like this and looking like, not really interested, I mean, maybe you're just nervous and you're not intentionally trying to give off this vibe of disinterest and just general life dissatisfaction. But it's actually surprisingly important to sit up straight, to look your interviewer in the eye, as much as you can without looking super creepy. And to sort of look alert, awake, excited, enthusiastic. And just like dressing for the part, looking the part is also really important. So if you look like you're enthusiastic and you have a lot of energy, then your employer will assume that you're enthusiastic and you have a lot of energy. And these are qualities that are definitely looked for in a new employee. So just make sure that you dress the part and that you look the part, because it's really important in an interview that you make a great first impression. Okay, number 10. This is a tip that I saw on a couple websites, which I thought was maybe the most important and useful tip that I've ever seen. And that tip is to be honest. Now, I don't mean necessarily being honest on your resume, which of course you shouldn't over-exaggerate what you've done. I mean, you can make it look good, maybe even better than it was, but like you shouldn't say, oh, I'm an aeronautical engineer, if you like played with Tinker Toys once. Like that's like, you have to obviously be honest and realistic with your skill set. So don't oversell yourself. But that being said, don't undersell yourself. If you did something really cool, then you can say, I did something really cool. This is your opportunity to sort of show off and explain why your skill set makes you an excellent candidate for this job. So don't oversell yourself and don't undersell yourself. Just try to accurately represent your skills. I think more importantly though, you have to be honest with yourself. If you go to the interview and you feel like it's not a good fit for you for some reason, maybe the boss rubbed you the wrong way, maybe the other employees didn't really seem like people that you would like to be working with. I mean, even if it is the perfect job, that doesn't mean that you have to take it. I know sometimes we get really desperate and we feel like, oh, I need a job, and then you just go ahead and take the first job that you get offered. I've done this before. So I know how it feels. But actually, it's important that you take a job that works for you, because if it doesn't work for you, then you're not going to be able to keep the job for a long time, or you're just going to be really unhappy the whole time that you're there. So I think being honest with your employer is important, being realistic about what you can do, what you can't do, but also being honest with yourself. Is this a job you want? Like, is this what you want? And if it's not, then take a step back and maybe go and apply for another job. Now you have 10 top interview tips, so that can help you in any interview that you undertake. And there are always different tips and things that we're offering on our website, so feel free to check us out at the link below. We also offer a 6-week intensive interview prep course, so if you want to take part in this, you can go ahead and send us an email. I teach this course and it's online through Skype, so we just take this time to really prepare you for that interview. So if you're interested, go ahead and send us an email or get in touch with us through Facebook or Twitter, and you can follow the links below. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this helps you in your next interview. Bye-bye.